of pain, but ladies and gentlemen, there is no pain in this world like the pain of rejection. That is a pain that stings us down in the core of our being. And from that moment, I made a promise to myself that someday I would have my revenge. No, they're going to hurt anybody, but I just wanted to be so accepted by the world. I wanted to be one of the kings, one of the princes of the world, so that I would never know that feeling of not being accepted. The funny thing about the story is my mom, she knew that I was rejected and brokenhearted. And, because I don't know what it is like about women. Most of you too young here, but the ladies in the back, something happens when a woman has a child. She becomes like a Jedi Knight. Like she just, listen, mama knows, all right? You cannot fool mama. So no matter how you try, even if she might make you think she doesn't know, she knows. And so my mom said, I'm going to call Michael's parents. I said, Mom, please, don't do that, because that's not cool. She did it. And a couple days later, Michael came up to me and said, Keith, can I talk to you? He said, what we did that day, that was wrong, and I'm sorry, would you forgive me? And I said, yes, I will. Why? Because forgiveness is a game changer. See, some of you sitting here right now, you don't know about forgiveness yet. Some of you have harbored in your heart bitterness and hatred toward people who have done stuff to you, or you're too afraid to go up to somebody and ask forgiveness for something you've done to them. But God might reconcile that with you tonight if you're open to having your life changed. Because forgiveness is a game changer. Fast forward to the end of the story, my senior year at Lacey Township High School, we were two-time state champions. And I was the captain of the team. And I walked out on the field, led the team out, and there was a guy on my right, the other captain, two captains. He was on my right-hand side, and that captain right there, he was my lifting partner. He was my friend. We played football together. We did everything together. And that was Michael. That's the power of forgiveness. It changes everything. Are you with me tonight? You see, but the joke is that I thought in my life at that moment that I was rejected in 7th grade. But really, how rejected was I? My mom loved me. My family loved me. I was still going to live. I want to share a story tonight from the Bible about a man who really knew rejection. Rejection from a family, rejection from his community, and rejection from humanity himself. See, the story occurs in Matthew chapter 8. Now, you can turn there if you want real quick, but as you turn, just listen. Because the story in the Bible is a real quick couple of verses. It's a story of a man with leprosy who had an encounter with Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. And now, as I read this couple of verses in here, 4 verses, that's all I'm going to read tonight. But before I do, you see, I got to set up the story so that those 4 verses, that we fully understand it, so it has an impact and we know what was going on. Now listen to me very carefully. When the Bible is quiet about something, boy, we need to be very careful about what we put in its place, right? So when I tell you about this man's life, this man with leprosy, some of it I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to use a little bit of our sanctified imagination and wonder what his life was like, because the Bible doesn't spell it out. But most of it, we know what a man with leprosy's life was like, based on Levitical law in the Bible and also history. So the first thing we got to talk about is, what is leprosy? This man had a disease called leprosy. Today we call it Hansen's disease. But what it is was an affliction of the nervous system. So the first thing is you can't feel pain anymore. All the football players are out there going, yeah, that sounds good. I want leprosy. I don't want to feel pain anymore. That would be pretty good, right? That's what I thought. But what happens if you sit on a tack? You don't feel it. What happens if you got an infection and you don't feel it? What happens when you lean your hand on a burning stove pile and you don't feel it? And because your nerve endings start to go south, you see, your body doesn't recognize anything anymore, and the blood flow to your extremity stops. And all of a sudden, if you have leprosy, your body begins, the blood flow stops, and your body begins to decay, rot, and fall apart. And so people with leprosy have this horribly disfiguring disease where their fingers and their hands and their ears and their nose begin to wither, rot, and fall apart. And eventually, as their body decays and rots, they die. This is the disease of leprosy. Now, the Bible doesn't say all the stuff about him, but we know he was a man that lived in Galilee. And we knew that he had leprosy. So, but what if this guy he had a wife? Maybe he had a wife. Maybe he had a little baby that he loved, a little baby girl that he loved a whole lot. Maybe he was a merchant. Maybe he was a fisherman. Maybe he was a farmer that loved to work in the fields and feel the dirt in his hands until that one day where he saw this spot on his hand and He was like, man, what is that? And he scratched it, and it felt weird. And he went home after work that one day. He came home to his wife, and he said, sweetheart, what do you think this is? She said, I don't know, but you better go see the village doctor. There's always a village doctor, right? And he went to see his little baby girl. He gave her a kiss. He said, I got to go see the village doctor. I'll be back to rock you to sleep. And he goes over to see the village doctor, probably the same doctor that delivered him, his wife, and that little baby. And the doctor took one look at his hand, and all of a sudden tears sprang to his eyes. Listen to me tonight. If you ever get a doctor's report and he brings it in and he's crying, it's going to be a bad day. And he said, you need to go see the priest. He wouldn't even talk to him. And so maybe this guy, he goes to see the priest. And then the priest took one look at his hand, and he knows it's leprosy. And now we know the life that this man must have had. The first thing the priest would do is say, you got to cover your face, because leprosy is so contagious, it can wipe out a village. He covered his face. He said, for whatever reason, he wasn't allowed to ever cut his hair again or comb his hair. He had to look completely haggard and unkempt. He had to put a big robe and a cloak over him. And sometimes history says they even had to put a bell over them. And wherever he went, when he saw he could never go in front of people ever again. He could never be part of society. He could never touch another human being. And if he saw anybody and they came within 6 feet of him, he had to scream out, unclean, unclean, unclean. So everybody would just stay away. The disease, the affliction was so bad that he couldn't go home that night and say goodbye to his wife and his little baby. From that moment on, he was completely rejected, ostracized from society. Guys, I don't even know how we get to this part in the story where he meets Jesus. Because I got to think that every night over some Galilean mountain, he just looked and he was just like, I just want to end it all. Think for a second. One of the worst things about this disease is you can never touch another human being ever again. Just think about it in your own life. How much we touch each other. How much we shake hands. How we hug. Even the people next to you rubbing shoulders, this and that. Imagine never being able to touch somebody ever again. I don't know what kept him alive. Maybe as he was going to jump off the mountain, he felt that little whisper that said, hold on, I'm not finished with you yet. I don't know, the Bible doesn't say. But we know that he probably, even to survive, he had to come into the village at night and try to get some scraps of food out of the gutter or out of whatever and just eke out this meager existence that was a half-life. But you know what? Maybe one night he went into the village and he heard these people talking from their house. And they were like, man, do you think it's true? Do you think it's really him? And he kind of was like, what are they talking about? And he kind of went to the side and he listened a little more. They were like, yeah, you know, this guy Jesus that they're talking about, he's coming tomorrow. He's going to be coming up on the mountain. Man, they're saying all kinds of crazy things about him. Could he be the Messiah? Could he be the chosen one? Could he be the Christ? They said, man, he's brought the dead back to life. He's healing people with a word. And man, they say when he speaks, there's something different about him. I imagine him hearing this in his mind and his heart saying, man, I got to meet this Jesus. I got to see if there's hope in him. I got to see if there's life in him. Can he be the man who can change my game? But there's one problem, guys. What is it? He can't go around people. If this Jesus is as popular as they say he is, then he can't get anywhere near the mountain. He can't be around anybody. Because if he does, what does he got to yell? What? Say it.
Unclean.
He has to say, you got to say it. He has to say it again and again. He has to say unclean, unclean, unclean. What does he have to say?
Unclean, unclean, unclean.
See, the point is, guys, sometimes even in our own lives, when we walk around the halls in our school or back in our community, we feel unclean. Maybe because of things that we've done or things that have been done to us. But if you feel like that tonight, wait till we get to the end of the story. So maybe this guy crept up on the mountain at night, just kind of hanging out, waiting for Jesus to come. And maybe he was like hiding behind these rocks so nobody could see him and squatting down until his legs were cramped. And then Jesus came. And Jesus spoke like nobody had ever heard before. He said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. He said, if you believe in me, you will be the light of the world. You will be the salt of the earth. Let your light shine before me. You'll be a city shining on a hill. He spoke like nobody had ever spoken in his entire life. And while he heard the words of Jesus, his heart began to beat. And now we pick up the story. Matthew 8, 1 through 4. It says, when Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Hold on a second. The man stumbles out of the rock, bells on, stumbling up to Jesus, says, Lord, if you are willing, make me clean. What's wrong with this picture? What should he have said?
Unclean.
He should have yelled out. What should he have said?
Unclean, unclean, unclean.
Why did he say to Jesus, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean? Listen to me, this is very important. I know it's a long week, and I know you worked hard, and I'm not going to be that much longer. This is very important. You need to hear this. You see, when you are ready to come before Jesus, you don't have to tell him about your junk. You don't have to count the laundry list of the things that you've done. You see, when Jesus sees you, he's not worried about all that. You can come to him tonight just the way you are and say, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. What a great promise here tonight. You can come to Jesus tonight. You don't have to fix anything. There's no lap to be run. There's no money to be paid. There's no ritual you need to do. You can come before Jesus tonight and say, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. How encouraging. Verse 3 says, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. Oh. Put yourself in this man's position for a second. We don't know how long he had leprosy. It could have been days, it could have been weeks, it could have been months, it could have been years. I've never been touched by another human being. Listen, previously to this, Jesus healed people in all kinds of different ways. He spit out some mud and rubbed it in somebody's eyes. He didn't even see somebody. He said, yeah, go be healed. And they were healed. He healed people with a word. He didn't need to touch this leper, did he? He could have said, oh, you're good. Just go wash in the water and you're clean. And yet the Bible says Jesus reached into his leprosy and Jesus touched him. Why? Why would Jesus touch the untouchable? Because he loved him. And because he has compassion for us. And because he knew that the greatest need in this man's life was simply to be touched. And so the King of Kings reached into his leprosy, reached into his soreness, reached into his disease, reached into that thing that was disgusting and decaying and killing him. Jesus reached into death and said, I am willing. I will make you clean. Incidentally, what's really awesome about this right here is that if Jesus wasn't who he said he was, then he would have just broken the law. You see, because it was illegal to touch a leper, wasn't it? You would think some holy spiritual man would know the laws. You can't touch a leper, he's contagious. But there's one thing in first century Judaism that could never become unclean, and it's the word of the living God. If you were a Jew and you were carrying the Torah and you dropped it in a puddle of mud, it wouldn't make the Torah unclean. It would make that puddle of mud clean. And so Jesus proved to the world right there that he is who he said he is. He's the Messiah, the King of Kings, the Lord of the universe, Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, Emmanuel. And he touched the man who no one else could. And he made him whole and he healed him. And he can do the same for you tonight. If you're willing to come and surrender your heart. He says, I am willing, be clean immediately.